At Memorial General Hospital in Virginia, the emergency department was running at full tilt. Machines beeped, phones rang, and overworked nurses rushed through the hallways. In the corner of the E, an old man sat slouched in a wheelchair, his hands trembling slightly, his eyes half-dash closed. Nurse Emily Carter had been on her feet for 11 hours when the charge nurse approached. "Room 3B, she said, sounding half apologetic. "That one's yours." Emily frowned. "New intake?" "Yeah, dropped off at the bus terminal. Amy's brought him in. He had a heart episode, but no ID, no family, barely responsive. Honestly, I just needed someone with patience to take him." That was code for no one else wanted him. Emily nodded. "I'll handle it." When she entered room 3B, the old man looked up briefly. His gaze was unexpectedly sharp. He wasn't confused. He was studying her. His face was lined with years, his gray beard trimmed unevenly. Around his neck hung a faded dog tag, worn so badly that the writing had been rubbed clean. "Good afternoon," Emily said gently, adjusting her tone to be calm, respectful. "I'm Nurse Carter. I'm here to take care of you." He didn't respond. His medical chart was thin. Age, estimated at 78. No known allergies. No family listed. Found unconscious on a bench near the city bus station. Vitals stable, but heart irregularities suggested a mild cardiac event. He'd been stabilized, but he still hadn't spoken up. Word. Emily began her routine checks, carefully adjusting his fore and examining his hands. They were calloused, tough despite his age. Old scars, long healed, ran across his knuckles and forearms. Not the kind from accidents, but from discipline, hardship, or combat. As she placed a fresh blanket over him, he suddenly tensed. "I'm just making you comfortable," she said softly, stepping back. He blinked slowly. A pause, then a single word. "Okay." It was the only sound he made that day. Later in the break room, two young nurses leaned against the counter laughing. Emily's babysitting Grandpa Ghost. One snickered. "I heard he thinks he's some kind of soldier." The other joked. "Probably believes he's still in Nam." Emily didn't respond. She had once been in uniform herself, a medic during the war in Afghanistan. She'd seen real trauma. The kind that didn't yell or cry. The kind that sat quietly, still as stone, hiding decades behind the eyes. That night, she stayed after her shift. Something about the old man Walter, according to the name written on his medical bracelet, stirred her curiosity. She observed him from the hallway. His hands moved again, slowly folding the corner of the hospital blanket with exact precision. Not just neat military neat, like the way soldiers fold flags. When she walked in, she noticed something else. He sat with perfect posture. Even while tired, his back was straight, shoulders square. Muscle memory didn't age like flesh it endured. Emily returned to the desk and opened a new note in his digital file. Patient shows signs of military background. PTSD possible. Displays discipline and alertness, despite silence. Recommend continued monitoring. She didn't know why, but it felt right to document this. Before leaving, she stood beside his bed and spoke gently. "You remind me of people I served with. The ones who stayed quiet, but had the heaviest stories. I don't know your past, but I'll treat you with the respect you've earned." Walter didn't move. But just as she turned away, she heard a small sound. She glanced back. He hadn't spoken, but his eyes were wet. Emily returned the next day with a sense of purpose. She found Walter sitting upright, unusually alert, his eyes locked on the wall-mounted clock as though tracking something. He still hadn't said much, but there was a quiet intensity to him, like he was waiting for something or someone. She walked in and offered a slight smile. "Morning, Mr. Reeds." No reply. Just that silent, unreadable gaze. Throughout the day, she kept an eye on him in between other patients. She noticed the small things. He flinched slightly when the intercom buzzed overhead, and every time a helicopter passed the hospital roof, his jaw tightened. It wasn't random. These were involuntary, trained responses. He was reacting like a soldier who'd seen combat. Emily had seen that kind of reaction before. She'd treated Marines during night raids in Helmand. PTSD wasn't always obvious. It crept out in fragments, in a tremble, a flinch, or the way someone sat at full attention while pretending to relax. That night, as a thunderstorm broke across the city, the power flickered in the hospital for just a moment. The rain battered the windows, and a sharp clap of thunder jolted through the ward. Nurses shuffled quickly, securing machines, checking patients. In room 3B, Emily found Walter with his eyes shut, breathing faster, his hands clenched tightly on the blanket. He was sweating. "Walter?" she asked, placing a hand on his wrist. "You're safe. It's just a storm." His lips trembled, and then he whispered, barely audible, two strange syllables. "Echo 4. 6. Emily froze. The words didn't sound random. "What did you say?" she asked quietly, leaning in. "Echo 4-6, he repeated, eyes still shut. She gently squeezed his hand. "Is that a call sign? A unit?" Walter didn't answer. Instead, he opened his eyes and looked at her with something between fear and resignation. Emily stepped into the hallway and pulled out her phone. She hesitated, then dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "Hey, it's Carter. Emily, I need a favor." "Military kind." Her friend, Mark Bishop, a former intelligence analyst now retired in North Carolina, picked up on the first ring. "You calling me means trouble," he said. She chuckled. "I've got a patient, elderly male." Whispered something. "Echo 4-6. Mean anything?" There was silence on the line. Then Mark's voice dropped an octave. "You sure?" "Yeah. Why?" He hesitated again. Echo 4-6 was a classified unit. Operated during the Cold War. Special recon and recovery deep cover stuff. Officially, they never existed. Most of them were listed MIA after something. Called Operation Silent Fury in '89. No survivors ever came forward. Hell, even I only know because I stumbled onto scraps. Emily's heart pounded. "You're saying he could be one of them?" "Could be," Mark said. "But if he is, and he's talking, someone somewhere is going to want him quiet again." That night, Emily didn't sleep. She returned early the next morning, and as she walked past the nurse's station, she overheard two interns laughing. "Hey, maybe the old guy thinks he's James Bond now," one chuckled. "The way he folds that blanket? Definitely CIA." Another mocked. Emily stopped and gave them a cold stare. "He's a veteran. Show some respect." They rolled their eyes, but didn't speak again. Back in 3B, Walter was awake. He looked at Emily and said quietly, "You called someone." She sat beside him, surprised. "How did you know?" "I know the rhythm of someone carrying secrets," he murmured. "You walk different when you're holding one." Emily smiled faintly. "So, who are you really, Walter?" He looked down. "Someone they erased. Thought it was for the greater." Good, she didn't push. She just sat there, knowing that if she waited long enough, he might tell her everything. He didn't that day. But before she left, he whispered again. "They said we'd never speak, that the truth dies in the dark." Emily left the room knowing one thing for sure: Walter Reed's wasn't a relic. He was a ticking time bomb of truth. 3 days after Walter Reed's whispered, "Echo 4-6, something changed. Word had quietly spread through the ward that the silent old man in room 3B might be more than just another fading veteran. Staff whispered behind clipboards. They, 2 nurses who used to giggle at him no longer peeked in his room. One even asked Emily if she was sure he wasn't dangerous. Emily didn't answer, not because she didn't know, but because she wasn't sure how to explain it. On the 3rd night, the rain returned, another heavy storm, another power flicker. The building groaned under the thunder, and in 3B, Walter stirred restlessly. Emily was on call, checking vitals nearby, when the alert sounded. She rushed in to find Walter shaking, sweat pooling on his temples. His heart monitor spiked erratically. She hit the code button and began basic seizure response. 2 nurses burst in seconds later, one of them, Lieutenant Parker, a brash, sharp-tongued woman known for her sarcasm. Emily barked, "Get the diazepam and a cold compress." Parker rolled her eyes, muttering, "Why waste meds on a guy halfway to the grave?" Emily snapped her head toward her. "Just do it." Walter groaned, his hand clenching the bedrail, and then suddenly his lips parted. He looked straight at Parker. His voice was hoarse, but clear. "Lieutenant Parker, Kandahar, November 2009. Echo Ridge, sniper fire, 3 down." You froze. The syringe slipped from Parker's hand and clattered to the floor. She stood frozen in place. Her skin turned pale. What did you say?" Walter closed his eyes, barely whispering now. "You froze. They carried you out. I saw." The room went utterly still. Even the heart monitor seemed quieter. Emily looked between the 2 Parker, visibly trembling, and Walter, now slumped, drained from the effort of speaking. "You served in Kandahar?" Emily asked Parker gently. Parker didn't answer. She simply turned and walked out, ignoring the syringe on the floor. The other nurse followed, speechless. Emily sat beside Walter, her heart pounding. "You knew her?" Walter gave a faint nod. "She was green, a medic, tried to act tough. Almost got 4 of us killed." Emily couldn't breathe. "How did you recognize her?" "Some things," he whispered, "you never forget." By morning, the entire night shift was whispering. No one laughed anymore when walking past room 3B. Parker called in sick for 2 days. Walter didn't say much else, but his eyes were no longer dismissed. They were avoided, revered, feared. Dr. Sims, the senior attending physician, pulled Emily aside during morning rounds. "I've had 2 orderlies asked to transfer off this wing," he said. "Says the old man's giving them nightmares." Emily stayed calm. "He hasn't done anything to anyone." Sims lowered his voice. "He's ex-intelligence, isn't he?" "I don't know," Emily replied truthfully. "But I think he remembers things the world forgot." The doctor gave her a long, searching look. "Keep him calm, whatever this is. Don't let it explode." Later that afternoon, Emily returned to 3B and found Walter staring out the window at the storm clouds. "Scared her," Emily said gently. "I didn't mean to," he replied. "But maybe she needed reminding." "Of what?" "That ghosts walk too." She sat beside him. "Are you going to tell me what Echo 46 really was?" Walter didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at his trembling hands. They made. "You swear never to speak. Erase our names. Families were told we died in training accidents. And those who lived? We became shadows." Emily asked, "Why now? Why break silence?" He finally looked at her. "Because I'm dying, and secrets only rot in the dark." That night, she began a new notebook. On the first page she wrote, "Walter. J. Reeds. Echo 46 subjects. Kandahar. Operation Silent Fury. 1989 present. First confirmed link to field identity since presumed Mia status. She didn't know how long he had left, but she was now determined. His story wasn't going to vanish. Not on her watch. As the hospital halls quieted for the night, a nurse walked past room 3B, glanced inside, and stopped smiling. because Walter Reeds wasn't just a patient anymore. He was a story the world had buried, and it had just started to surface. 2 days after the Parker incident, Emily sat in the staff lounge, scrolling through declassified military archives. She couldn't shake the feeling that Walter Reeds wasn't just a relic from some forgotten battle. He was the missing chapter in someone else's history. She typed in Eco 46, but nothing official came up. Then she tried Operation Silent Fury. That's when the screen froze for a few seconds before flashing restricted access denied. Her stomach turned. That level of redaction wasn't normal, even for older operations. Only high-level military intel remained that tightly locked, especially missions older than 30 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her encrypted notes and reviewed what Walter had already whispered. Kandahar, Echo Ridge, 3. Down, Lieutenant Parker. Each detail had checked out. Eerily so. She sent a secure message to Mark Bishop again. Need more. Can't let this die here. Walter's story matters. Mark responded an hour later. Echo 46, Deep Recon, Anti-Smuggling, Sabotage Ops during Cold War. Targets, Eastern Europe, Pakistan border, and rogue paramilitary groups. Team vanished in 1989. Last confirmed operation, Kazakhstan, black site. Internal leak suspected. Emily stared at the message. Kazakhstan, a place known for being both remote and forgotten, perfect for erasing people. She returned to Walter's room. He was awake, slowly sipping broth. His hands still trembled, but his eyes were alert. Know about Kazakhstan, Emily said gently. Walter paused mid-sip. I didn't expect anyone would ever mention that place again. You were there? He nodded once. They sent us in to dismantle a bioweapons program, said it wasn't sanctioned, that it didn't exist. We found the lab, destroyed it, but someone tipped off the other side. Only 2 of us made it out. Emily leaned forward. What happened to the other survivor? He looked away. He didn't survive long. Silence settled between them. Then Emily asked, What was your rank? Walter slowly turned to face her. Major, Walter Joseph Reeds. Serial number 4082319. Confirmed Aya, 1989. Her breath caught. He was officially dead. 35 years. What have you been doing all this time? Hiding, listening, watching. They buried us, but I kept the truth alive. Emily swallowed hard. Why come back now? He stared out the window again. Because my heart's failing. And because I can't let the people I lost stay nameless forever. That evening, she printed his photo, what little data she could verify, and taped it to a folder labeled Walter J. Reed's Echo 46, Unburied File. That same night, a man in a dark gray suit visited the nurse's desk, asking about, John Doe in room 3B. He didn't show a badge, just a slip of paper with Walter's hospital ID. The receptionist was new, and pointed him toward Emily. She met the man in the hallway. May I ask who you're with? Just a concerned party, he replied. Emily frowned. He's stable, but resting. I can't allow visitors without patient consent. The man smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I understand. If he remembers anything useful, let us know. Useful to who? She asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he left a card blank white, with nothing but a phone number, and walked away. She slipped it into a locked drawer and returned. To room 3B. Walter was staring at the ceiling. They sent someone, didn't they? He asked without looking at her. Emily was stunned. How did you know? Because the ghosts always return when you start to talk. She sat down next to him. What do you want me to do, Walter? He looked her straight in the eyes for the vadi. First time, tell the truth. For those who never got a funeral. For the names carved into stone, No one ever visits. Emily gripped her pen. Then start from the beginning. Walter closed his eyes and began to speak. Slowly, painfully, but clearly. He told her about his unit, how they were recruited out of traditional forces, trained in isolation, assigned identities that didn't exist, how their missions weren't documented, and their failures meant they'd never return. He described names, faces, the way Johnson always hummed Sinatra when nervous, the way Chun tied her bootlaces twice before jumping from a plane, how Ramirez sent letters home no one would ever receive. Each word felt like sacred ground. Emily typed every detail. Walter paused only to breathe, then said, "There's a file, buried under Bravo Charlie 12, steel container, labeled Echo. It has what they erased. Names, photos, evidence. Coordinates?" She asked. He nodded. "I'll try to remember." As she stood to leave for the night, he whispered, "Thank you." She turned. "For what?" "For not treating me like a body." Walter's voice grew weaker as the days passed, but his mind remained sharp. He would sleep for hours, then suddenly wake and recall names, times, even weather conditions, from missions lost to history. Emily documented everything, page after page of field notes, whispered secrets, and codes only someone from the inside could understand. She stored everything in a secured laptop, air-gapped from the hospital system, encrypted and hidden in her locker. She knew what she was dealing with now. This was national, historical, and dangerous. Emily wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was now a steward of memory and a witness. On Tuesday afternoon, Walter fell unconscious. He was rushed into the IQ for emergency cardiac stabilization. Emily stayed with him as the monitors beeped relentlessly, willing him to keep fighting. By nightfall, he had stabilized, but just barely. He couldn't talk for hours, only blink and move his fingers in short, tired gestures. But even in that state, he was lucid present. Late that evening, a new figure entered the hospital. He was dressed in a clean charcoal suit. No ID badge, no name tag, just like the previous visitor who'd stopped by earlier that week. But this one didn't go to the front desk. He walked confidently through the hallway, found Emily, and waited silently outside room 3. "You're the nurse?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said carefully, standing her ground. "We have some questions for your patient. He can't speak right now." The man gave her a cold, tight smile. "That's unfortunate." Emily narrowed her eyes. "If you're here officially, where's your clearance?" He didn't answer. Just said, "Make sure he stays cooperative." Then he walked away. Emily returned to the room. Walter was awake now, faintly, but watching. "They came again," she whispered. He blinked once. "What should I do?" She asked. Walter slowly raised a trembling hand and pointed to the drawer where she kept the white card. She brought it out. He stared at it, then, surprisingly, smiled. "That number?" He rasped. "Belongs to the same agency that burned our file. If they're showing up, someone found my name again." Emily felt her throat tighten. "Are you in danger?" He shook his head. "Not anymore. But the truth is." The next morning, word began to spread among the hospital staff. A handful of off-duty veterans, upon hearing whispers about room 3B, quietly requested to visit Walter. Emily allowed one at a time. The first visitor, Sergeant Ramos, a Desert Storm vet, stood silent at Walter's bedside and gave a slow, solemn salute. Walter blinked once in return. He didn't speak, but Emily noticed his lips curve slightly upward. A memory awakened. A bond rekindled. By the end of the day, 6 more visitors had shown up, all word of mouth, all silent, all saluting. It was as if, piece by piece, Walter Reeds was being remembered again by those who had long believed he was gone. Then, the tension deepened. That evening, the hospital director, Dr. Harland, called Emily into his office. "There have been reports," he said, folding his hands, "that you're involving the hospital in something sensitive." Emily met his gaze. What kind of reports? A man in a suit. Unidentified guests. Security footage with faces flagged by. Government watch lists. Emily hesitated. "Walter Reeds is not just a patient. He's—" "I don't care what he was," Harland interrupted. "This is a hospital, not a Cold War museum." Emily stood, face flushed. Then maybe the government should have taken responsibility for the men they erased. There was silence. Then Harland said coldly, "You're on thin ice. Keep this under control, or I'll have him transferred." Emily walked out without responding. That night, she found Walter awake again. She sat beside him, her voice low. "They want to move you." He shook his head slowly. "No, not yet." "Then what do I do?" Walter looked at her with intensity that defied his weakening body. "Tell them," he whispered, "I'm not done." Yet, the words echoed in her mind for hours after she left. That same night, another unknown figure attempted to access room 3B. This time, security stopped him. When asked for ID, he left without a word. The hospital was changing. The room everyone used to ignore had become a fortress of whispers and stares. Once mocked, now Walter Reeds was the center of something that made even seasoned doctors uneasy. And Emily knew. The room wasn't just freezing with fear. It was freezing with the weight of truth returning from the dark. Asterisk. Walter's breathing was growing shallower each day. Machines kept the rhythm of his fragile heart steady, but Emily could tell his time was running out. Still, in those brief, lucid moments, he spoke with purpose. Not everything he said was coherent, but certain names, coordinates, and mission. Fragments were repeated with astonishing consistency. Emily had created a system. A binder with 3 sections confirmed, unverifiable, and redacted. She cross-referenced his spoken words with old declassified documents, and what little intel Mark Bishop continued to send. The more she documented, the more undeniable it became. Walter wasn't hallucinating. He was remembering. And what he remembered could change history. She sat with him late one night, the lights low, the hallway outside quiet. He stirred, eyes fluttering open, and looked toward her. "Bravo, Charlie 12, he whispered. She leaned in. "The buried file?" He nodded slowly. "It's not just a name. It's a site. Northern Utah. Remote. Decommissioned bunker. Cold War era. We used it for contingency storage." Emily scribbled notes. "What's inside?" "Steel case. Marked Echo. Photos. Dog tags. Original tapes. Intel logs. They buried it to keep." "Use buried," she frowned. "If I found it, would anyone believe me?" He gave a weak laugh. "Doesn't matter. Once it's found, they'll know I talked." "That's enough." A pause. Then, "I need you to promise me something." Emily looked into his sunken eyes. "Anything. If I don't make it get that file to someone who'll tell the world." She hesitated. "Walter, the people showing up here, some aren't here to help." "I know," he said. "They want silence. But I want legacy." That night, she backed up all her notes to 2 encrypted drives, one hidden in her apartment. The other kept on her person at all times. She used military-grade software her brother, a cybersecurity expert, had given her. She wasn't going to take chances. The next day, the room grew quieter. Walter didn't speak much. He seemed to be slipping in and out of the present. At times, he muttered names. Johnson, Sean, Ramirez. And at others, he called out warnings. "They're in the trees. Watch the ridge. They're coming." Emily knew these weren't delusions. They were replays. Echoes of a battlefield buried for too long. Midweek, a high-ranking military official arrived, this time in full uniform. He requested a private meeting with Emily. She agreed, reluctantly. The man introduced himself only as Colonel Hayes. "Nurse Carter," he said, "you've done your country a great service by caring for Major Reeds, but it's time we step in." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Step in?" "He's carrying volatile information, dangerous if misinterpreted." "He's carrying the truth," she corrected. Hayes offered a polite but stiff smile. "The truth can destabilize things we've worked hard to keep buried." Emily said nothing. He continued, "We're prepared to take custody. Secure facility. Full military honors." She shook her head. "He doesn't want to be transferred. Then he may not get a choice." Emily stood. "He gave me his story." "That story doesn't belong to the government anymore." Hayes stared at her for a long moment before turning and walking out. Back in room 3B, Emily found Walter sitting upright, awake, as though he'd felt the conversation happening down the hall. "You told him no," he said. "I did." He smiled faintly. "Good." She sat beside him. "They'll push harder now, and you push back." The next day, Emily received an envelope at the nurse's station no return address. Inside were photographs, black and white surveillance, images of her entering and leaving the hospital, walking to her car, sitting at a coffee shop with her laptop. A simple note was clipped to the back. "Stop digging." She took the photos to the hospital director, but Harland only looked at them briefly before saying, "I think it's time we let the authorities take this off our hands." That evening, she transferred Walter's files to a hidden server and emailed a heavily encrypted version to Mark Bishop. The next morning, Walter was worse. His breathing was strained. Oxygen flow increased. The doctor said it could be days or hours. Emily stayed by his side, gripping his hand. He opened his eyes. "Did you hide it?" "Yes." "Did you send it?" "Yes." He nodded weakly. "Then?" "The mission is complete." Emily choked on her tears. "No, not yet." "You're still here." His eyes flickered toward her with something like pride. "You did what no one else ever could. You saw me." That night, he fell into a deep sleep. Outside his room, 2 veterans stood guard, unofficially, silently. They weren't security, but no one asked questions. They weren't there to protect Walter. They were there to protect the truth he'd fought to leave behind. By the next morning, Walter's vitals were faint but steady. Emily never left his side. His presence, even in silence, had become a symbol an old soldier's stand in a world that had forgotten men like him. The hospital, once dismissive, now moved carefully around room 3B. No one mocked anymore. Dr. Harland remained distant, but wary. The visits, the military presence, the manila envelopes, something far bigger than health care, was brewing under his roof. Emily's encrypted message to Mark Bishop had been received and responded to. Mark didn't call or text. He showed up in person. He arrived dressed in civilian clothes, posing as a family friend. He flashed a press badge at the front desk, but didn't elaborate. Emily met him in the hallway and led him to the staff break room. "I read the file," he said. "You weren't exaggerating." "I told you," Emily replied. He remembered. "Everything. What's in Bravo Charlie 12 could cause a congressional investigation. Maybe more. They'll bury it again," Emily said. "Unless we make it public." Mark hesitated. "That's risky." "They'll come for you." "They already did." Mark looked into her eyes. "If you're serious, we do this tonight." She nodded. He may not have another sunrise. That evening, Emily wheeled in an old digital recorder, a secure one, military grade, and placed it on Walter's bedside table. She leaned in and said gently, "Walter, This is Mark Bishop. He's here to record your story. The whole thing." Walter didn't respond at first. His eyes were closed, his breath shallow. Then, slowly, he opened them. Focused and spoke. The recording lasted 45 minutes. Walter's voice was weak but clear. He told of the mission scrubbed from official records, the orders given in shadows, the men lost and never named. He spoke of Bravo Charlie 12, the names of his fallen brothers, the day the tapes were buried and why. "They told us we were ghosts," he whispered. "Said our service never happened. But I remember, and now so will others." Emily fought back tears the entire time. When it ended, Walter looked at her. "Promise me one thing. Anything. Tell the world I was here." She gripped his hand. "I promise." That night, Mark uploaded the recording, anonymized the metadata, and sent it to trusted journalists, historians, and the Veteran Advocacy Network. The story was out. The following morning, Walter didn't wake up at 6:43 a.m. He passed peacefully, hand in Emily's. She sat there for a long time, his call sign, Ironbird, echoing in her thoughts. Not just a name, a legacy. Word spread quickly through the hospital. Veterans returned. Nurses lowered their heads. 4. The first time, the intercom announced a fallen patient's passing. Code white. Veteran. Room 3B. Moment of silence requested. The hospital fell still. Dr. Harland didn't protest this time. Outside, the sky was overcast. But to Emily, the world had never looked more clear. Later that day, a group of uniformed soldiers arrived, not with orders, but with honor. They saluted. His empty bed, then stood in silence. The truth was already rippling. Online, articles appeared. Whistleblower veteran breaks silence from hospital bed. Buried mission exposed after 50 years. A segment aired on national news. The public response was immediate and massive. Politicians called for hearings. Families of missing soldiers reached out, desperate to learn if their loved ones were named. Someone sent flowers to room 3B. The card read, "To Ironbird. We never forgot." Others followed. Soon, the room was filled with tributes, flags, medals, even handwritten letters from children in military schools. Mark called Emily that evening. "They can't suppress it now," he said. "It's everywhere." "Good," Emily said softly. That's what he wanted. But peace didn't come easily. The next night, Emily found her apartment ransacked, nothing stolen, but everything turned over. A message. She filed a report. The officer raised his eyebrows at the name, Walter Reeds. "You sure you want to keep poking this story?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, "because he died for it." Days later, the official investigation into Walter's past was announced. Senator McConnell requested the military open their Cold War archives. Whistleblower protections were reactivated for aging veterans with untold missions. Bravo Charlie 12 was located. Not just the bunker, but the files. Unredacted, original, undeniable. They prove everything Walter said, every last word. His name made headlines, but not as a ghost. As a hero. 2 weeks after Walter's passing, the once dismissive hospital hosted a memorial ceremony. Room 3B had been emptied, but flowers still lined the hallway outside. A bronze plaque was mounted. On the door, in honor of Major Walter Ironbird Reeds, patriot, truth-teller, forgotten no more. Emily stood at the podium that day. She wore her scrubs and clutched the worn notebook where she'd written every word he told her. Veterans, hospital staff, journalists, and even members of Congress gathered. Some came in uniform, some in silence, but all came in reverence. "I didn't know Walter as a soldier," Emily said, her voice steady. "I knew him as a man who remembered what others wanted forgotten." A man who taught me that truth doesn't come easy, and neither does honor. The audience stood in silence. Then one of the old vets who used to sit beside Walter spoke up. He wasn't just a soldier, the man said. He was the only one who came back and still fought for all of us. Across the country, Walter's story became a flashpoint. Congressional hearings unearthed buried files, lost tapes, and secret missions. Journalists traced the echoes of Bravo Charlie 12, revealing other veterans who'd remained silent out of fear or shame. Now, with Walter's courage, they began to speak. A documentary titled The Ironbird Tapes was released. It combined Walter's voice, historical records, and Emily's real-time journey. It became a national sensation. Schools played it in history classes. Veterans organizations screened it, for Free. Emily was invited to Washington, D.C., to accept the Presidential Medal of Freedom on Walter's behalf. She didn't wear a dress or a gown. She wore her Navy scrubs and pinned Walter's dog tag to her chest. The president looked at her and said, "You didn't just care for a patient. You carried his mission across the finish line." Back home, Room 3B was transformed into a special ward, the Reed's Recovery Wing. It became a sanctuary for veterans in critical care. Emily led it, not as a nurse, but as director. She developed new protocols, not just for physical healing, but emotional restoration. Every veteran admitted was encouraged to tell their story, no matter how dark, confusing, or painful. A digital archive was created. Veterans spoke. Families listened. The government, for once, didn't shut it down. On the wall above the entrance to the new ward, a quote from Walter read, "You don't bury the truth to protect the nation. You bury it because you're afraid of what it says about you. But someday, someone digs it up. Make sure they know you tried to tell it." One morning, Emily received a package. No return address. Inside was a journal. Brown leather. On the front, the same symbol Walter had described from Bravo-Charlie-12. Inside, names, coordinates, mission notes. A note tucked between the pages read, "He wasn't the only one." Echo 7. Emily knew then. The fight wasn't over. Others were still out there haunted, ignored, erased. But thanks to Ironbird, they now had a voice. 1 month later, she was on a panel at the National Veterans Symposium. A grizzled man in his 70s approached her after her speech. He looked hesitant, but his eyes held recognition. "You were the nurse, weren't you?" he asked. "The one from the story." "I was." He held out a hand. "Bravo Charlie 9. I never talked to anyone before now, but maybe it's time." She nodded and gestured to a chair. "Tell me everything." Emily knew she couldn't change the past, but she could illuminate it. With every story she recorded, with every name she restored, with every memory she helped resurface, she was fulfilling a promise to Walter and to the countless others like him. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a soldier of truth. And Walter Reed's, the man once mocked in a hospital bed, was now immortal, etched into history, not for medals or fame, but for daring to speak when others stayed silent.